U.S. President Donald Trump is threatening to impose 35% tariffs on Canadian imports.
Now, in a statement from Prime Minister Mark Carney that was posted late last night, just before midnight, he says that Canada will work towards a revised deadline of August 1st.
Just before midnight, Prime Minister Mark Carney posted a quiet but pointed message. The Canadian government, he wrote, would continue defending workers and businesses. And as part of that response, Canada was now working toward a revised trade deadline of August 1st. No televised statement, no political theater, just a calm, strategic adjustment meant to buy time, lower the temperature, and keep doors open. It was a subtle move, but it carried weight, especially in contrast to the unpredictability coming from the South.
What we're seeing here is the president is now beginning to outwardly weaponize these tariffs as his signature economic policy, not only against other countries, but key allies and partners of the United States.
In this second term, President Trump has elevated tariffs from economic tools to political weapons. He doesn't just use them against adversaries. He uses them against allies. Brazil was hit with 50% tariffs just days earlier, reportedly over its handling of former President Jair Bolsonaro. Copper imports got a 50% duty with almost no industry consultation. And now, Canada. The rationale behind the move was familiar. Fentanyl trafficking, retaliatory duties from years past, and barriers to U.S. dairy products. But behind the surface, analysts say this is about leverage. Trump sees Canada not as a trade partner, but as a bargaining chip. And as always, the threat comes with a deadline. Sign a new deal by August 1st, or pay the price. It's not the first such ultimatum. Earlier this year, tariffs on steel, aluminum, and autos were all hiked. In each case, the announcement was sudden, the criteria vague, and the targets wide-ranging. But as experts have warned, including from the conservative Manhattan Institute, even Trump's fentanyl claims about the northern border aren't backed by substantial evidence. Still, the bigger issue may not be the tariff itself. It's the instability it creates. For Canadian businesses, it's not just the cost of duties, it's the unpredictability. Will the rules change next week? Will they get worse? As one economist put it, uncertainty is the tariff you don't see, but feel every day.
Carney goes on to say that throughout these trade negotiations that the Canadian government has supported workers, supported businesses, and will continue to do so.
In response, Prime Minister Carney did not hold a press conference. He didn't make a fiery speech. Instead, he posted a message just before midnight. Canada, he said, would continue supporting its workers and businesses. The government would stand firm while working toward a new deadline, August 1st. It was a shift in tone, away from confrontation toward resilience. Carney emphasized Canada's progress in fighting fentanyl and its willingness to collaborate on public health. He framed the moment not as a battle of personalities, but as a test of long-term policy. Behind the scenes, his team has been working with provinces and territories to build a more integrated national economy. Projects of national interest are moving forward. And trade diversification is becoming not just a goal, but a necessity. This strategy, measured, quiet, but firm, has drawn mixed reactions. The leader of the Conservative Party criticized Carney for moving the deadline instead of holding the line. Bloc Québécois raised concerns about prioritizing oil exports over broader diversification. And Unifor, Canada's largest industrial union, representing over 320,000 workers, called Trump's threat economic extortion. Still, Carney has held his course. No escalation, no retaliation, yet, just focus and time. For over 60 years, the US and Canada have built one of the closest economic partnerships in the world. From the Auto Pact to NAFTA to USMCA, goods and people flowed across borders, supported by rules, not threats. That structure is now under pressure. Tariffs are becoming daily headlines. Deadlines are moving targets. And what once felt like a dependable alliance now feels like a negotiation with no floor. Carney's approach may not generate headlines, but in a climate of escalating trade brinkmanship, it might be the only thing that prevents collapse. Because here's the risk. Even if Canada complies, even if it signs a deal by August 1st, there's no certainty that Trump won't shift the goalposts again.
announced a 35% tariff on Canadian goods to go into effect on August 1st. The letter says the 35% tariff will apply to all Canadian imports, separate from the existing levies on autos, steel, and aluminum.
On the evening of July 10th, the world learned of a new tariff announcement from President Donald Trump. A 35% duty, blanket, across the board, set to hit all Canadian imports starting August 1st. Not just on cars, not just steel or aluminum, but everything. And this time, there was no press conference, no back and forth with reporters, just a letter posted online addressed to the Prime Minister of Canada. A threat disguised as policy. A warning cloaked in grievance. It may seem like just another number in Trump's long list of trade salvos. But to Canada and to the broader global economy, 35% isn't just a number. It's a signal that the North American partnership is now under open strain, and the question is no longer if a new trade war is coming, but how deep it might go.
And frankly, Donald Trump just treats Canada like trash over and over and over again. We're supposed to be in a negotiation to try to secure some kind of framework deal to go forward. This letter is just a picket fence of lies.
Trump's stated reasons for the tariff? Fentanyl shipments, unfair trade barriers, and Canada's agricultural supply management system. But none of these are new. What is new is the timing and the escalation. This tariff threat comes just weeks after Canada withdrew its digital services tax to restart negotiations with Washington. That act was seen as a major concession, worth nearly $1 billion Canadian dollars annually. In return, Canada expected serious engagement. Instead, it got a 35% threat letter. At its core, this is classic Trump. Pressure, escalation, and control. The letter even suggested that Canadian companies could avoid tariffs if they moved manufacturing to the United States. Not a proposal, a demand. And just like that, the message is clear. If you want access to the US market, come build inside the walls, or pay the toll. Ottawa's official response was measured. No public escalation, no angry press releases. Instead, Prime Minister Mark Carney kept the focus on diplomacy, quiet, targeted, and strategic. Canada has set a firm internal deadline of July 21st to reach a resolution. Behind the scenes, ministers are working with both U.S. trade teams and international allies. But the calm front masks real tension. Many inside Canada's policy and business circles are urging stronger measures. Analysts warned that Trump's letter an economic missile, and warned that it may be time to stop turning the other cheek. And Carney knows what's at stake. Over 850 billion Canadian dollars in two-way trade flowed between the US and Canada last year, according to Statistics Canada. If a 35% tariff takes effect, entire industries could face shockwaves. Lumber, agriculture, small-scale manufacturing, and retail. Already, provincial governments in Ontario, Quebec, and Alberta are pushing back. At the same time, Canada is accelerating trade diversification efforts with ASEAN and Europe. Beneath the surface, steel is being sharpened.
And they do consider China an enemy, but they consider Canada an ally. And so he's using this as a stick, as a cudgel, as a weapon to intimidate us into changing something that they don't like.
But this goes far beyond Canada. If Trump is willing to attack America's closest ally, its largest energy partner, its most integrated supply chain, what message does that send to other nations? China may be a strategic rival, but Canada is a trusted defense partner, a G7 member, and NATO contributor. And yet, it's now treated as a threat. For the US economy, tariffs mean higher prices. For Canadian producers, they mean lost contracts and tighter margins. And for global allies, it raises a dangerous question. Can the United States still be trusted to uphold stable trade partnerships? That brings us to July 21st. It's not just a deadline, it's a test of whether trade diplomacy can still work in a world ruled by threats and tweets. Trump has made his move. He's betting that pressure will break the Canadian position, but Canada may have other ideas. With quiet resolve and growing frustration, it now faces a choice: bend under pressure or respond with its own version of steel. Because when 35% becomes the new starting point, what happens next might change the rules for everyone.
Another letter has been posted on True Social, the president writing to the leader of Brazil, saying that he's imposing a 50% tariff on all imports coming in from Brazil as soon as August. A Section 301 investigation into all imports coming in from Brazil.
On July 9th, 2025, the White House posted another tariff letter, this time aimed squarely at Brazil. A full 50% tariff on all imports, effective August 1st. It's the highest rate announced so far in this administration's latest wave of trade pressure. This move wasn't unexpected, but it was still jarring. For Brazil, it was a direct escalation. For the rest of the world, it was a warning. Especially for nations still in negotiation, or running out of time to get there. Canada and the European Union are both in the room with Trump's team. But they're not safe. They're on the clock. The Brazil letter did more than slap a high tariff. It triggered a formal Section 301 investigation into Brazilian imports, something Trump had used in his first term to justify long-term tariffs on Chinese goods. But what made this letter stand out wasn't the economics. It was the politics. In the Post, Trump linked the decision to Brazil's handling of former President Jair Bolsonaro. He called it unfair. He called it a witch hunt. And that made the 50% tariff not just about trade, but about power. Brazil didn't get a negotiation window, it got a punishment. The kind that doesn't start with a phone call. It starts with a headline. And with that, Brazil became the latest example of how this White House is using tariffs not only to correct trade imbalances, but to send political messages.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said the EU was working closely with the Trump administration to reach a deal.
Well, in Ottawa, the PMO says Canada's July 21st deadline is serious, and consequences for failing to meet the deadline for Canada aren't known.
While Brazil faces tariffs outright, the European Union and Canada are deep in negotiation, each on a tight, ticking schedule. The EU is pushing hard to finalize a deal before August 1st. European Commission leaders confirmed that talks with the US are active and making progress. Trade Chief Maroš Šefčovič said a joint statement is close. But Italy's economy minister warned, it's complicated. The text may not be finished until the last minute. Canada, meanwhile, is working against a different clock. Prime Minister Mark Carney's team is negotiating under a July 21st deadline, 10 days earlier than Europe's. This special cutoff reflects how Trump's team has chosen to handle Canada separately, after Canada dropped its digital services tax on June 30th to reopen talks. Unlike the EU, Canada is keeping things quiet. No daily briefings, no policy statements, just back-channel movement. And that silence might be deliberate, because in this game, what isn't said can be just as important as what is. Still, both regions are in the same position. Negotiate fast or face tariffs soon. The threat isn't distant. It's set to arrive August 1st. The Trump administration has said over 20 nations could face tariffs in the coming weeks if they don't enter negotiations. On July 10th, the White House confirmed more tariff notices would roll out in phases, targeting sectors like semiconductors, pharmaceuticals, and other strategic supply chain goods. This reflects a shift in strategy. The new tariff wave isn't just about trade balances, it's about alignment. Countries seen as moving closer to China could face heightened scrutiny. In that light, Brazil's case stands out. The 50% tariff, paired with a Section 301 investigation, came amid concern over its strengthening ties with Beijing. In response, China has warned that countries signing deals with the US that harm its interests may face retaliation. This is no longer just trade policy, it's positioning in a global contest, and the consequences will be economic. What happened with Brazil wasn't just about one country, it was about setting the tone. Trump is reshaping trade not through global frameworks, but through pressure and pacing. Some countries get letters, others get deadlines. But all of them now face a decision: move fast or pay the price. For the EU, the calendar says July 31st. For Canada, it's July 21st. For the rest, the time is shrinking, and the tariffs are already written. This isn't just a negotiation anymore, it's a countdown.